Hi, this is my story of booking a mother and daughter trip to South Africa. This happened in 2022, and it ended up being 22 months with no resolution, no contact or anything. And I just want to give my story because I feel that my story is important. My story doesn't invalidate anyone else's. If you had a great experience with the real South Africa, your experience doesn't invalidate mine. I'm telling my story. Hopefully, they can treat their customers better. In February 22, I booked a trip for my mother and myself to Durban, South Africa. This is where she wanted to go. She wanted to go to the Zulu region. And also because of the climate, it's near the coast. We live near the coast in the States. She wanted to be somewhere where maybe the climate was similar. But what happened was it became too similar, where we had a terrible experience with Hurricane Harvey, mainly due to the flooding. And the KZN flooding happened, and my mother, told me to go ahead and switch the trip. So the trip started in February. We did get an email from Latasha. It was in regards to verify. It was a double trip, but both of our information was registered, and she wanted to just track because it was registered to the same account, but she never communicated with my mother, and it's always been that way. So we ended up switching the trip in May from Durban to Johannesburg. And because my mother, instead of going there as a vacation, she wanted to go there as a vacation go see because her goal was to basically expat somewhere else. She was one of the many seniors during the pandemic that bought into a lot of the promotional campaigns and propaganda where many Americans were looking elsewhere. And so that's what she wanted to do. So we happened to switch the trip over to the Johannesburg real estate tour. This was in August. We happened to um, pay a payment, and the payment never went through. And that's when we discovered that there was a merchant dispute between TRSA and PayPal, where they chose to part ways with them. And we had to get pretty much all the thousands of dollars that we spent refunded back to us and transferred over into a Stripe account. Um, the thing about PayPal is, of course, you can track your information from your banks, but with PayPal, you also get like a tracking number. With Stripe, at that time, when you paid, it just went into a Stripe account, and you had to track everything from your bank. I happened to get charged from that instance when we spoke to the representative because we had a problem, and Latasha was very helpful in helping us resolve it. But the PayPal representative, I don't know what he knew from his end, but he was very rigid about why we were, getting refunds of thousands of dollars. So I'm not quite sure if he was aware of what was happening with their relationship with the vendors or not. That had nothing to do with us. My mother wanted to go on her trip. I did get charged for that. And it ended up in the long run that PayPal instances ended up kind of following us in the long run when it came to tracking finances and later on a discrepancy. So that's the reason why I mentioned it. In early September, we happened to go ahead and pay off that trip. Um, there ended up being a $1,985 discrepancy. I know Natasha mentioned that she went to the United States, and because we switched from Durban to Johannesburg, maybe there was an issue with tracking. I knew I didn't owe $1,900. I knew that if there was going to be maybe a difference, it would be maybe $5 or $25. So I tried to get her to, I actually called and tried to get her to compare her information with my information so I can see, hey, if I'm missing something, if I'm falling short, I can compare my information. I couldn't get that information from her. She pretty much said, I don't know what you're talking about. So I ended up all night long pulling up my mom's information, my information, because that Durban to Johannesburg trip can complicate things, but I was able to get the tracking information with PayPal, everything we paid for, everything that was switched over to Stripe, and send it to her in email in a chart. And the thing is I was frustrated from doing that, but I'm a person who have high empathy. So when I get on the phone, I wanted to express my frustration, but what I told her, I said, I know it was a lie as far as calculating. And she just, all of it. And by the way, you don't owe $5 because that was the conclusion I came to. You don't owe $5. You owe $10, but we're going to go ahead and move it along. Everything is going to be okay. And this ends up being a red flag for future references, because what it ends up being is. Another thing I wanted to show was this is actually an invoice that's not part of the PayPal payment plan. It's actually in July. So this was when we were paying and through PayPal, but this came directly from the real South Africa. So if they could send me an invoice in July, but when this 1900, I'm not going to say 1900 anymore, I'll say 2000, closer to 2000, when this near 2000 discrepancy came up, and I happened to ask her on the phone, can you send me invoices or send me something where I can compare your information to mine, because I just wanted to make sure that, if I'm short by some money, I have proof on both ends. She didn't send anything, but you had no problem sending something in July. But in September, when I supposedly owe almost $2,000, you pretended as if you didn't know anything. You pretended as nothing ever happened, and I had to show you proof. I wanted to note that Latasha did contact us. She contacted us because it had to do with having the flights for the itinerary. This was when we were going on the real estate tour trip, and that's when my mother was in the hospital, and that's where the decision was made to, hey, we're not sticking with this particular real estate tour, but we want to go ahead and keep the trip, get her rehabilitated, let her see a limb specialist. And she even told us that she had someone traveling like that was coming in the spring, had a similar situation, and everything was fine. So that was part of the reason why we just kept it at an unspecified date. When she did get a terminal diagnosis, this was in November, and November 15th, we just had to cancel everything. What we did is I happened to send an email and I requested a refund. And I did remember that Latasha did send an email with the terms and condition document that we never signed. And so in the email, I happened to cancel the trip, but I also happened to ask for a refund. But I placed in that email that we will honor any terms and condition. And in response to that email, Natasha asked for our bank information. That was in response. That was November 15th. And we knew in regards to that trip, that real estate tour trip, we knew how tired they were going to be after. So we just waited weeks, as far as getting a response. And we did get a response. We got a response in 2 weeks. It was at the end of November, when she mentioned, hey, we haven't forgotten about you. My mother was very much alive. We still hadn't received a refund, but the refund was acknowledged. And I just want to give that clarity. The refund was acknowledged. It was never a question of anything else. We didn't hear anything until 2025 when the narrative completely changed. And I want to send note in December, because the trip was canceled in November. The acknowledgement was 2 days after we canceled, 2 or 3 days, November 19th. And then, we got another response after the real estate tour in November. Um, I happened to do an update in December 16th. And, Latasha said somehow she couldn't send money to my bank. Okay, here comes the PayPal to Stripe issue. If you're refunding, aren't you just refunding the money back to the bank accounts that paid? Or are you sending it overnight? Like, your businesses are based in the United States. So I just found that to be very strange. I happened to get a refund. That refund situation didn't really happen. It didn't. I was asking about it and nothing happened and nothing came through. You know when it came through? After my mother died. And then here's where things went strange. Normally, when you pay for a trip with credit cards, and it was my card, my mother card, the refund goes right back to the original cards. And that's even standard practice with processors like Stripe and PayPal. And by this time, all of the payments were through Stripe because they made us switch over. So in our case, we had two different cards, mine and my mom's. So I expected two different refunds. I canceled on November 16th. On November 19th, days after, TRSA asked me to send my personal banking information for a direct deposit. When I did the status checkup on the 16th, on the 20th, she sent me an email saying that she couldn't do a direct deposit with my bank account. Something was happening on her end where it wasn't allowing it. And this is the 20th. Around this time, there was a winter storm that was coming to the Houston area. So we had two or three things going on. We were concerned about whatever Christmas plans we had set up being derailed by a winter storm knocking out our electricity because we had all of this experience in the Texas freeze prior. And then my mother went to the hospital around 6, 7 o'clock that evening. The same day on the 20th, by around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we happened to get a call that she passed away. And so dealing with all of that, winter storm, pretty much no Christmas, now funeral planning, and just a complication that goes around all of that. I happened to just send her a brief email, like my mother passed. So I couldn't really get in the middle of a lot of what was going on at that time. So basically, I wasn't able to really send her anything or any information back until basically Christmas, because we had no Christmas at that time. You're dealing with funeral arrangements, winter storm, situation with your parents. My parents are religious, so they never divorced, but they were separated. So dealing with all of that, I pretty much wasn't able to really follow up with her until January. I decided to follow up for the new year on January 10th, and I got a response on January 12th from Latasha, and she said that we need to hear from our lawyers regarding your request for your mother. As you stated, your mom was now deceased, and there are laws that we need to make sure we don't break with this process. We will be in touch. Now, know that that trip was canceled on November 15th. Know that this language has changed in the new year, and that was fine. If she needed to speak with her lawyers, I did follow up to let her know that Chase, my mother's bank, was aware of her death, and they will allow any incoming deposits. Even though this was not part of South Africa's issue, this was the genesis of the estate issue that we were having. I mentioned before that my parents were married, never divorced. There was a back and forth with our biological father, so she has intellectual property and other things. So basically, Chase said, we'll take whatever money that's, owed to her, that's due to her, that's fine. And I mentioned the family has not closed her account. Well, the family is in the genesis of probate issues. And I happened to send an email, got nothing. And so that's what made me go and seek out my own legal counsel. And I happen to, if you read my blog, I happen to go ahead and secure an attorney at that time. And he looked through the whole process and he said, this is just a stalling tactic. They don't want to pay you anything. Just, before you sue them, go ahead and do an email campaign. So I posted 2 emails of just brief. All of the emails I sent going forward have always been extremely brief like this. No details, anything. And so one of them, I added my mother's bank information in again. And the other was I happened to attach her death certificate. So, of course, I expected no response. But what I did something different. I decided to CC the email address that Mark, her husband, had. And it was completely different from what we're going to see in 2025. But I CC'd that email when I was talking to her because I knew she would respond, because I felt whatever was going on in this process, he probably didn't know what was going on. He probably didn't know that she acknowledged the refund when my mother was alive. He probably didn't know anything, just like he didn't know when he responded in 2025. So let me go ahead. She did respond. And she said, well, thank you for the death certificate. That was sent 18 days earlier. She said, well, can you please send proof that you are the executor of the estate and have the lawyer who is in charge of your mother's estate contact us direct. Okay. And the reason why it dragged on so long is I was originally just going to sue them at the beginning of 2023. Once she mentioned about the lawyers, once I knew that we were never going to get contacted again, my perception from the way she behaved, I was just going to sue them. But when I spoke with the legal counsel and we did the whole email campaign, and she only responded when I CC'd the email that Mark used back then, the other, I guess, co-founder, never conversed with him ever during this whole process. Only 2025 was the closest I ever got to conversing with him. But she did respond and ask for my mother's executor's information in regards to that. And because it was an issue of probate, as far as my mother and father were married all of our life, religious, never got divorced, just like celebrities and a lot of other people, you're going through probate issues. And the only thing I could do was give her updates on probate. It went back and forth between my brother and my hands because he did have a relationship with our biological father. I don't have any relationship with him. So that was a no-go. So in that case, the only thing I could do was just be compliant and give her an update on what's happening in regards to the estate. But I didn't know that that was going to be a license or a way for them to just go ahead and practice disengaging and absolutely ignoring me with no communication. Okay. And so my last follow-up in 2023 was just to give an estate update. After that, I just moved on. And the only thing was it became a pending issue because I just thought that until whatever get resolved with the estate, that they would just move forward and send the money to her estate account. I want to give more information on why this actually took so long. In the process, in 2022, right before Christmas, my mother passed away. She had the terminal diagnosis in November. That's when we completely canceled all aspects of the trip. That's when the refund was acknowledged. My mother was alive at that time. When she died in 2023, I was supposed to sue them at the beginning of the year or spring because I got no communication back. But what happened was my nephew who stayed with me, he had schizophrenia, but he had another illness and he ended up passing. So I had to deal with my mother passing, my nephew who lived with me passing. So 2022, 2023. By the time 2024 came and I had to pretty much pick up my whole life, I went back to work downtown. I ended up working in all of the different elections, the local elections at that time. Sheila Jackson Lee was alive running for mayor. We were dealing with the Democratic Republican Party. Then we were dealing with all these small municipalities. And then, right before I ended up leaving, we were working on the presidentials. And during that process, I was in between the Harris County Administrative Building downtown and other locations. I happened to get stalked on the Metro Rail and attacked twice, same person, that turned my whole life upside down. I had to change jobs, change everything, change the trajectory of my whole life. So 2022, 2023, 2024, I pretty much went through a living hell where South Africa was the least of my problems. But I was not going to carry that on my soul anymore because it was just an extra added burden of just silence. It wasn't any kind of communication. And that was the reason why it ended up pulling out that long, because I did not expect my nephew to pass away. I did not expect having to go through what I went through dealing with the elections and just switching careers, switching everything. And I just made a decision, 2024, December, I'm not sitting with anything on my soul. I'm not taking this into 2025. And I made that decision, and that's when I began to report them to the agencies, the Better Business Bureau, Federal Trade Commission. And then I knew their business. They're Americans who have businesses that are operating from Virginia. I, sent a complaint with their Attorney General and also their Better Business Bureau. They're Americans who target Americans for business and live a geo-arbitrage life in South Africa. So in that case, that's when that's when movements started to happen, because my goal was, I'm not taking this into 2025. It ended up going into 2025. Because that's when Mark decided to respond. And this was really strange because I never, ever communicated with him. So when I got information, when he brought up about, the main thing I caught was the refund policy. And I'm like, this is so weird, because if it was just an issue of refund policy and cancellation policy, do you know what I put in my email November 22nd? That I were under any terms of the document that we didn't sign that was sent 7 months later after we planned the Durban trip? So I know you didn't know that because I never communicated with Mark. So from what I saw, that was just retroactive enforcement to basically just, hey, bring him out and we're going to close it this way. And it also showed a pattern, again, of when you make a mistake and you acknowledge a refund and you acknowledge that you were going to pay us, and my mother was very much alive, that you chose to switch the tables around and turn it into something else. Another interesting thing about the Better Business Bureau, and I don't have any evidence, but with the Better Business Bureau, they preemptively closed my case. And, I don't know if it was because they're in Virginia and TRSA is based in Virginia from what I know, but they did reopen it. That was the only platform where Mark would communicate with me. And, when he said that he wanted, to solve this directly or solve this, I decided to go ahead, and the new email that I saw, never saw this email before, I personally sent him an email. It was basically foreclosure. I was upset, but I let him know what was in the terms. Like, this could have been solved 2 years ago. And so what he did, he responded and the Better Business Bureau, saying that they operate with integrity, they operate with all these different morals, and he's highlighting open communication. We know that never happened. We know that I was ignored. We know that you can't say integrity because you turn the tables twice. You turn the tables when you retroactively enforced a refund policy that I never knew about and that I would have honored because it was in my email in November. We know that when that $1,900 discrepancy happened, what happened, how I was treated, how I was spoken to. And I had to show proof and you didn't. So, all of that language, I just saw that it was absolutely performative. It was just performative. There was nothing in that was really authentic and truth. It was just you're only responding because you're talking to an agency. So in this case, as far as getting it resolved, I sent an email to your email and I never got anything back. And, it's the same pattern. So I did want to highlight that. If someone had a good experience with Real South Africa, your story is your story, and your story doesn't invalidate my experience. I hope for them that practice make perfect, where you can treat your customers better, but I feel that it's my place to tell what I had to endure, the long journey that I had to endure, and also the lessons that I did learn. I do have a follow-up video where there are valid questions that people happen to ask me. And, I can't get defensive. I have to be honest. And I feel that there are lessons that I learned on my end too. But your experience, if you had a great experience, that's wonderful because practice make perfect. And hopefully with something as basic as effective communication, maybe, they will perfect that skill and no one else has to endure what I had to endure.